everybody. Today is January 17th, 2023 at 9:30 a.m. This is a special council meeting where we will be interviewing two legal firms for representative of the city. I'm calling this meeting to order. Can we all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, well, Mary's been very hard at work for us getting all this information put together. I thank you, Mary. And thank you all for being here. Everybody's here for roll call, so we're gonna have a wonderful meeting today. Right now, we have a half hour before our first interviewer comes in. And so we would like to go over the questions with everybody and also our scoring sheet. We have a scoring sheet that Mary put together, but we're trying to figure out how we're gonna get to 100 points. And that's what we need to figure out here before we start.
So it's, go ahead.
I was gonna say, we have, I think, 90 points here total. I haven't given this a whole lot of thought, but in going through it, I was thinking, question, or scoring number 3, 20 points on that seems a little heavy. I would recommend that under other, we move at least that full 10. If not 15, and include other relevant experience. I think both firms bring a fairly wide and deep breadth of experiences and abilities, but there were differences, and I think that would be important, because we're not just looking for a city attorney. So there are tons of other things that the city could require. So
I agree.
I don't know if I need to make a motion, or I would say we cut number 3 to 10 points. If we want to keep the TIF districts separate, I would say add 5 points for that, and then move, if my math is right, 15 under other relevant experience. Just a suggestion.
Was that a motion?
No,
We don't need a motion.
Okay.
Just discuss.
No.
I guess I'd like to comment on this. Attending city council meetings is pretty important to me. Now, I don't know that it's 20. I think we could reach some sort of compromise there. I guess my suggestion would be, not that they attend every city council meeting, but their availability and their ability to attend city council meetings as needed, is pretty important to me. I was wondering maybe if we could compromise and do 15 for 3, and then take that other 5 and move it down to the TIF districts.
Well, if the objective is to get to 100 points, experience with TIF districts seems to me a fairly important item. So we're at 90, you could just add 10 to experience with TIF districts and get to your 100, and leave everything else as it is.
I like that.
And then just other, we're just not gonna, I don't think this is working.
Yeah.
So, at other, we're just gonna leave it blank and not have points on it, or continue to 15 for.
Well, okay, that's a good point.
It makes, I mean, do we need to get to 100? Could we, I mean, is that a mandatory thing? Could we go to 110 or 80? I mean, it's up to us, so it's.
Getting back to the other, what is other?
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
nothing there, so.
I mean, I think Tim was looking at like other experiences, whether it be something out of the blue comes up, which probably will happen, or trainings that both of these offer, what kind of trainings they offer for us and support on other sides, so.
We have to remember, we're trying to differentiate between the two firms.
Right.
So, we're all gonna score things differently, but we should each be consistent in how we're scoring. even if I think nobody's gonna get a 20 on number 2, I should have some thought in mind on why.
Sure.
What's the difference between a 15 and an 18, for example? It makes it a little more difficult having such high numerical values to something, especially when you only have 2 firms.
Can I
Sans a
suggest-
whole new scoring methodology, which I should have brought up last week. I think we're kind of stuck with what we have, but, again, we're trying to come to a decision on between 2 firms, so, 100 points is pretty typical. We could do 200, we could do 500, we could do 10.
It comes down to which one looks the best for, and could do the best job for the city. I mean, so it doesn't make it to 100 points, but this is what we got. I mean, whatever you think is gonna do the best job for the city.
Can I make a suggestion that we do 10 points for cost of services, number 6, and 10 points for experience with TIF districts, and then we've got our 100. Our other isn't really, you know, I mean, we can consider it, but then we've got our 100, and we've got 10 points for cost of services, number 6, 10 points for experience with TIF districts.
I like that idea. I mean, we're still gonna ask questions to get to that other. I know some of our questions already that we have listed are for other things than what would be listed under here. I do have a question too, like as far as civil and criminal goes.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I guess I get the civil part and the criminal, I mean, I get them both, but do we need to question both today? Or how do we do it properly? I mean, I guess I just,
I would like clarification on what constitutes criminal
yeah,
before we throw that in there.
I agree.
So, and I'm no expert, but I have one question regarding, the nuisance, and I think that would be a more criminal, type of case versus just standard mill municipal operations. And only the city attorney, county attorney, or state attorney general can file a nuisance complaint. So I think, given the history of our conversations with some property in our town, I felt it was an important question. And I think that might be a distinction between municipal, the municipal law and criminal.
That clarifies that for me. I mean, cause your mind can go a million places when you hear criminal, right? Did this lawyer only do criminal for so long in the last 5 years, he's one of the municipal, is that what they're asking? Or, you know, other, you know, my mind went everywhere, and I don't trust the Google, cause the Google misdirects people, but that makes sense, I like that, I mean, so we leave that in there, and
We leave civil and criminal?
yeah, and then criminal, we're just talking about them enforcing nuisance complaints, or, and we could ask them too, I mean, we
Exactly.
can elaborate on that and ask them what other experiences they have.
So if we want to split those, then we just have to make sure they don't add up to more than 20, right? For those questions.
Right, yeah, this is
Okay.
the max points for each of these
Okay.
categories.
Right. Have we reached an agreement on splitting 6 and 7, 10 apiece?
I guess so long as, under question, or the scoring number, item number 2, the firm has significant expertise in the practice of municipal law. It's a pretty broad category, and I think we could lump all those other considerations in with that. I still think number 3, 20 points to that is high. I mean, we could demand they be at every city council meeting, and that score should be either a yes or no, 20 points or 0 points.
I understand that, but we're not demanding the word as the ability to attend, so I would,
Right.
I mean, obviously, we would never do that. But on the other hand, we do have a fairly new council here, and it would be nice on some occasions, maybe even in the beginning, to have an attorney here. Especially with some of the resolutions that we might have coming up.
So I just, it's an easy 20 points. They're gonna say yes.
Right, because if,
So that's my only thing. I don't disagree with you. I think it's very important, believe me. If we could afford to have it, I hope they're here at every single meeting we have. But I think, to your point, there's some we don't probably need them here for, and we shouldn't. you know.
We shouldn't require
But
this.
then again, if we're on a flat fee,
Right.
you know, is that part of what we negotiate? So, in my experience, I don't like to give away points. And this seems to me to be a giveaway.
so why don't we make that 10?
Another
Put 10 at experience with TIF districts and 10 at other.
Yeah.
Whatever, you know, that should be. Cause you're right, they're gonna say yes. I mean, what firm are we gonna hire that says, no, we can't come to your meetings?
Right, exactly. You could also throw, you know, number 2, 30 points. I mean, you can take that wherever you want. I just think that one, is too much of a game.
You know, I like moving 10 to the other, because then we can, because some of the questions we can, you know, get points for would be trainings or support for other needs and other things they do, you know, because they all have something else that they do other than just represent just the city. I mean, they have trainings, they have HR support, they have, you know, they ordinances they can go over, I mean, stuff like that. I mean, I like that.
And it kind of allows each of the members to kind of personalize their scoring too. If they hear something that's really important to them that's not maybe included or obviously included in the above, we can use that. I would just say, on the other, let's try to be sure we can explain our score there, what the other is for.
So,
Yeah, I could agree to that too.
so are we moving number 3 to 10, is that correct? Or 15, or leaving it? I guess I'm not sure.
3 to 10, and then 8 other experiences would be 10 points.
And
And that
tip is 10?
And tip is 10,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And that gives us 100.
And then these ones down here, points for civil representation, points for criminal representation, those are add-ons to 100?
That's what I got, they were like a bonus.
Okay.
Oh, I would,
I
I
mean,
guess I didn't
number-
notice that. We could probably scratch that, cause we're just going on total points, right? And if
Yeah,
we have
I
a-
mean, we're already saying civil and, criminal above, so
Right.
we could erase that and.
Yeah, just have an aggregate score
Yeah.
for each of the items.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think-
Differentiate.
yeah. That was just set up as a subtotal of the civil. and
Like
criminal.
separated.
Yeah.
Okay. So one score for each item 1 through 8. Not differentiating between civil and criminal. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. That sounds good.
Is there any other discussion that we wanna do on the rating score?
Okay. Thank you for checking.
Mayor, can I ask if does anybody have any questions on the questions?
I
Any
do.
changes? Any,
Just one suggestion here on the recommended questions that Mary put together from, you know, other interviews. on this, number 2, what do you know about Scandia? What would be the challenges with representing our city? I think we should ask them what they know about Taylor's Falls.
So-
And what would,
Did you wanna add?
That was the, yeah, do you wanna add that to the ones they already had? Oh,
Can you?
okay,
yeah,
yeah, whatever you wanna do. I did not bring the reference of the ones that we went off of.
okay, so yeah, these are reference questions. I don't know if you guys got copies of them, but
Yep.
on the first page, there's a question number 2. And then, what do you know about Scandia? Well, we should ask them, I think, what do you know about Taylor's Falls?
I think I had a question on mine that I worded.
Okay.
Yeah, that's number 1, right?
Oh, yeah, sure, okay. Well, generally, yes, that's pretty close.
Oh, in my draft that I sent, out. And I don't, maybe that was, I don't know if that was just to Mary or the whole group, now that I think about it.
Well, let's see, your first question is.
Well, he has one, says, why do you
Yeah.
wanna, why does your firm want to represent our city of Taylor's Falls? We could reword that,
Yeah.
and what do you know about our city?
Yeah.
So Lee will ask, what does your firm want to why does your firm want to represent our city of Taylor's Falls, and what do you know about our city? Correct?
What's that question?
Last page at the bottom.
I have 2 copies.
Okay, oh, new leads? Okay, yeah, I see it, okay.
Does that work?
It does, that works, let's see what else.
I had one thing that came up, and I know we don't wanna question everybody to death and be here for hours and hours, but I think this is important. We have a local city close to us that is having an emergency meeting regarding a current bill at the state, HF 100. And I think we need to find out if they've worked with any municipalities regarding this bill. It seems like it's gonna pass, and so Rush City is already having an emergency meeting. Are you guys familiar with the bill?
No.
Okay, so the bill, so last year they passed CBD edibles. This bill is to open it all the way up, and so cannabis sales can go state, for smoking and not just edibles. And so, it sounds like it's gonna pass. We don't have an ordinance right now, so that's something obviously we're gonna have to talk about in the future. But I think, from what I've gathered, a few of the municipalities around have already started putting this together. Because if they don't have it together, when, in a year after this passes, it's like the Wild West from what I understand. So Rush City's already started, which was interesting. I thought that came up last week. I just wondered if they had experience with anybody else.
Well, remember the last Wanigan days that, guy that set up in the parking lot? I thought after that, after Wanigan days, we did propose an ordinance for the city regarding sale of, edibles and such.
Yeah, we put a moratorium on it, which is only good to a year. So August of this year, somebody could just, I mean, any store in town could start putting chocolates and edibles out, but if this passes, then we have another year. But I think it's important if they have experience to share with us, cause we're gonna have to find, we're gonna have to depend on them. It's new to me, I don't understand it all, I mean, I understand the bill, I've been reading it, but I wanna protect our city and not let the Wild West. I mean, you go out to Colorado, I went out there a million times for work, and it's like, when I first opened up, it was like, whoa.
Right, but it's really regulated.
Yes,
so-
yeah, and this bill regulates it a lot. I mean, it has to be grown here, it has to be sold here, it can't go out, blah, 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 but.
The other one was very ambiguous.
Yes, so they're really not, but I think if we have, I would like to just find out if they work with anybody, cause that's a good tool for us to bring in, cause it's another thing that we're gonna have to tackle here in the next 6 months or so. Start talking about at least, I mean, if we can beat it and get it in place, then we'll fend off anything we don't want. I'm not saying any, what way I mean or not, I'm just saying, we need experience and.
That would be another,
That'd be a whole new question, so I don't know if you wanna if we wanna add it, or if we want
just
to.
what experience do you have with Bill HF?
Yeah, I was just saying, have you been monitoring the current bill, HF 100? I'm assuming they'll know what that is. And then, have you worked with any municipalities on developing, ordinances regarding this bill?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, adding that.
Why don't you ask it, Brandon? We can throw that under that last other.
I wrote it down this morning, it popped into my head as I was sitting there, I'm like, oh man, especially after seeing Rush City jumping on that.
I'd like to be in front of those kind of things, not behind them.
Most definitely, yeah, and it's a whole new world for us, so, I mean. And they're both so close to the Capitol, their offices are, so I'm assuming somebody from
Sure.
their office is over there,
I'm
but.
sure they're covering it.
And they might know more that they can share with us too, so.
And I would, I have a request on my question number 3. If I could just change, tell us about the type or types of municipal government structures, specifically weekend or strong mayor. I would like to change specifically to just, for example, just to open things up a little bit. Most of the cities in Minnesota are weak mayor systems. It's very rare that we have a strong mayor system. So I just didn't want to pigeonhole or focus too much on that distinction. If they have other government structures that they can talk about, that would be great.
So your bullet point, you just wanted to change.
Just want to change specifically to, for example.
Okay.
Under, my questions for, Larry and Hood, number 1, is your fee schedule negotiable, for instance, a flat fee retained? Well, they've already sent us one, a proposal for a flat fee, so we could take that one off the,
Okay.
off the charts.
Is there something that you'd wanna change on there, because after 2023 ends, it looks like they're going to, from what I gathered out of that, it would go to a fee-based from what they sent. So they're gonna lose the retainer after their first year,
We could,
is what I gathered out of it, maybe I read it wrong.
I just thought I think both firms just gave us a 1 year.
Yeah.
proposal.
So every year they'll
So
just change.
they could.
Yeah.
What would you typically see your fee increase go? And I think historically it hadn't changed much, but I think that's probably gonna change going forward.
We can just leave that and do our own due diligence, I guess, too, cause they're gonna say, I don't know, I mean, or they do, historically, maybe it's a 1% or 3% increase, I don't know. But,
Right, because we could request a 3-year proposal if we wanted to, from
yeah,
at the conclusion of this.
I mean, bad idea. That's longer than a year.
it just scares me because if all of a sudden we do use them more, being new, and then all of a sudden next year it's $1,000 more, well, we'll be right back here again, or, I don't know,
The
I
only-
just,
Yeah, the only concern there is if we're not happy or pleased with their services in the first year,
yeah, we
we
could
can
just
switch.
move on.
So we need to keep that in mind as well.
True. Do we wanna just wait and table that and then see how things go and then? go
Yeah,
ask
it
for
wasn't a
3 years?
suggestion, it was just a statement.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I would just,
Okay.
we could ask for a 10-year contract, I
Yeah.
think, if we wanted to.
You know, just keep in mind too, we're discussing the questions, but you could still bring questions up that aren't on here as you listen to them and move forward.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think you can also do that, it doesn't have to be exactly what's on
Sure.
our sheet that we put together.
And after we're done today, if anything comes up, just shoot questions over to Mary and she can send them if we don't have an answer, if something comes up.
And I would say, to Mary's point, feel free if you don't understand an answer or it spurs another question, that is, tag on, because we're here to vet this, so, don't hold back.
And I think our first
I was
interview,
looking
just
at
walked
it.
in. We went to the restroom,
Excuse me, I gotta go do that myself.
Also, Mr. Mayor, we start to run late on the first one. And you do still wanna take a quick break, cause it is a long time,
Mhm.
you could still feel free to do that,
Okay,
and then we'll get the new ones in.
okay.
Can I ask that when you ask the questions, you really have that microphone?
I don't, just.
You don't have to
Yell.
eat it, Brandon, just,
Mine's-
I don't think
I
these are
don't know
gonna
why.
Or the volume is turned down.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Oh,
Any trouble getting up here? Are the roads okay?
Well, it's Minnesota.
You're here.
I'm here, it wasn't that.
I know last night I ran up to the grocery store quick and changed over the snow, the biggest snowflakes I've ever seen, and everything started icing up coming down the hill in St. Croix. And I thought, man, if this goes all night, I don't think anybody's gonna be making it up here, and I'm glad it quit.
We were in Woodbury and, we stopped to have supper in Stillwater, and it was raining when we went into the restaurant, and when we left, it had started snowing. And it was a tough drive home. I mean, the roads were completely white, covered, and
Well,
Snowflakes about that
story
big.
in my life in Colorado.
I should have been channeling you.
What part of Colorado are you in?
Leadville?
Yes.
Our son and his family live outside of Leadville in the mountains. But I got caught in the bomb cyclone storm just the other side of everything. And it was brutal.
I've only driven up through the mountains once, and I got hit in a storm, and I was like 22 years old with a rental car, and my now wife was next to me, and it was like 1 a.m, and we were going by Downey Pass, and I looked at her and I went, I don't feel like, we're not gonna recreate this story, and she was there, I was just 5 miles an hour, cause I don't have experience, so. All right, well, welcome.
Thank you.
You can join us up here if you want.
Sure, looks like the hot seat.
No hot lights.
we just have to talk loud because the microphones aren't working.
That's all right, that's actually probably mine. If I do mumble though, let me know.
We're just gonna ask you to just introduce yourself to us, and our wonderful audience, and then we have some questions for you, and we'll have a good discussion. We can actually do, if you wanna go down the line and introduce ourselves first, if you'd like, or, so.
I'm Mary Thomas, city clerk, treasurer.
Tim Grote, council member.
Larry, Julie council member.
Brandon Weber, mayor.
Lee Samuelson, council member.
Troy Hanson, council member.
Well, good morning.
Mark?
My name's Fritz Knack. I'm a lawyer here in Wisconsin and in Colorado. I've been practicing municipal law for over 40 years now. And what I like to focus on in the practices that I've been in has been smaller communities where I think the presence of a lawyer is more useful. By taking that choice and focusing on that, of course, it has not made me rich. Most communities, and we're very sensitive to that, are not interested in spending a lot of money on lawyers. I don't know why. But we've been able to, I think, focus primarily in the area of providing a lot of service, hands-on. We're available, we've got the answers, and I show up at meetings. That seems to be becoming less and less common. It's part of the package as far as I'm concerned, because it's one of the things that keeps people out of trouble, is when they ask questions. Our rule is there aren't no dumb questions. We like to represent cities, we like to represent small cities, and to really do that, you have to interact and develop a relationship with city council. They're the deciders, we're not, we're here to advise and represent, but we find that in developing that kind of relationship, for the most part, we're able to guide people. Counsel is the word that gets used in a way that they avoid trouble. And you do that by knowing what the law is, by knowing what your place is, which is not to tell you what to do, but to tell you what your options are. And to do what we can to make your job easier for you from the point of view of law. I have to say, we consistently do smaller cities, but every once in a while, we do get asked to do bigger ones. So I've done Fridley, we've had Maplewood over a period of time, and right now I'm representing the city of Ramsey. And it was interesting because what they were interested in was someone who would be at meetings, be present, give them advice, and someone who had some experience. And they had some difficulties with their prior council. And one of the first questions they asked me is, do you come to meetings? Yeah, I mean, that's what we do. And it's worked out very well. They've determined they kind of like that. In fact, more than kind of, and we've got a really good relationship. That's usually bigger than the kinds of cities that I end up representing. There were very specific reasons and very tough things going on politically there, and they needed somebody present, and they needed somebody that would do all that. And I'm easy in a way because I've been around a long time, and I know most of the answers or can find them out for you if you have questions in a very short period of time. And of course, these days we're allowed to cheat. We have the internet, so I can get you an answer real fast if I need to. But I always remember what I was told 40 some odd years ago by Pete Popovich, who was the guy I started practicing with. He ended up in the Minnesota Supreme Court. And he liked to tell the story of a city council where they would ask the lawyer a question, and the lawyer would say, oh, that's an interesting question. I'll go check the books, give you an answer next week. Goes to the next council meeting, gives them the answer, they ask him another question. Oh, that's an interesting question. I'll look it up, and I'll tell you next week. And he did that one more time, and a council member raised his hand and said, I move we buy the book and fire the lawyer. You want answers, and once in a while there are really intricate and difficult questions that come up. For the most part, I've pretty much seen it all. Some good, some bad, and all the rest. And even if you're not thinking, oh, thank God, we've got all this terrible stuff that we're dealing with our city, he may know all of that. It's still comforting to know, I think, that you've got an experienced lawyer who understands the cost things that are related to hiring a lawyer, and is interested in representing a city your size. And I very much am. And I was delighted to see that you were looking for someone, and I was delighted to put our name forward. So that's, our proposal is in there, the necessaries. Yes, we are insured, we never had to ask to be covered, but, that's important. We have references, I've been around, like I said, a long time. I would be the one, the reason I'm here, and I'm here with the committee, is that I'm the one. So if you were to appoint the firm, that tells you what my backup is, if I need it, but as a practical matter, you can be dealing with me. That's kind of my initial pitch. If you have to answer any questions you might have.
Well, thank you very much, Fritz, I appreciate it. All of us kind of compiled questions, so I'll go down, we'll just go on order, and I'll ask, and, we'll just move down the line that we really have, so. As far as, my first question would be, how would you, handle the balance between ethics, law, politics, and city administrative demands, council demands? We are, three of us are new to the council. And community needs that are all part of this municipal environment.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's the art of practicing municipal law. First off, I don't get involved in local politics. I've had some good friends, and sometimes it's hard not to. It's a temptation you have to avoid. But I have some good friends that lost clients, municipal clients, that they maybe cared too much about. They were passionate about it, and all of a sudden they thought that their opinion, politically mattered. And that happens in politics. There was a response to that, and usually it ends up with a lawyer getting fired. And I would say rightly so. I mean, my job is not to, and I've had this discussion, with city council members that say, well, what do you think? What do you think? Am I right? And the answer answer is what you're doing and what you're proposing is very legal, counselor. It's one of the options you have in front of you, but I can't tell you what to think or what to do. And sometimes that can be tough, especially when, you know, you've been around for a while and you get to like the people that are involved and you start feeling, it's just not something that you have the option of doing. Ethics, interesting you should ask. I'm in the process of preparing an ethics course for litigators in Minnesota here. I do a lot of teaching now, online, which is another whole interesting experience. But the most recent one that I will be doing for Minnesota lawyers will be on the issue of litigation ethics. What you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. So it's obviously something that's I'm aware of. I'm very happy to say that I have had no ethical violations in my time here, and there, but for the grace of God, it happens to all kinds of people, but it hasn't happened to me. And the same thing with any serious malpractice claims. Isn't necessarily, when somebody gets a malpractice claim, you know, they made a mistake. That's not to say that they're bad lawyers. But I haven't had that happen to me, so I can say that and smile. But how you mix that all up, it's hard. And you know, where it gets more interesting and more difficult, and one of the reasons I like smaller cities, it gets harder in smaller cities than in bigger cities. You know, where, you know, a city council's got a staff, you know, that puts distance between them and the public. You don't get that option when you're in a smaller city. You know, the public's right here. You've known Sven or George or whoever for, you know, 40 years, and you know, you're not letting him add 16 inches to the crest of his garage, and all of a sudden you've turned into the worst person on the planet. You know, interaction, where you are right now is actually one of the most difficult places in elective government to be. Because you really are dealing with people where they live. You're dealing with zoning, you're dealing with what they can build or what they can't build, all that kind of stuff. And it's, the political pressure, you know, that's all yours. But what you can do or not do in terms of the law, that's me. And my job is to make sure that those red lines are clear, that you know where the guideposts are, so that you don't go off the rails in the middle of an angry debate, to keep you going where you need to go. And I've got a lot of experience doing that. Did that answer your question? I mean, it was kind of a...
It did, no, it did. Thank you, it's a big question. My next question is, describe for us a time when a client, such as a mayor or a council member, or in a city's case, a citizen misunderstood something you said or wrote. How did you determine there was a misunderstanding? How did you correct it? What was the outcome?
If you're asking for a specific example, I'd like to tell you I just don't remember making a mistake like that. But the usual, what you do is if you, especially if I, as your city attorney, say something to you that turns out to be incorrect, I have to immediately tell you that I did that. And what I would do is ask you, meaning collectively the council or the staff, what I should do to correct that. And that may just be a fairly routine thing, you know, where I would say, whoops, you know, I said you had 2 years and all the rest, actually you have 3, you know, my bad, that's a mistake, and that's the end of it. Or if that's right in the middle of something, you know, where it's real nasty, then to some extent, there's a political judgment involved too, you know. How do we get the lawyers to, you know, what do we do? And the political part of that has to be done in some way, not through you, but with your management, let's say, so that the impact of that error correction doesn't cause more trouble than it would need to. So sometimes that's just a judgment call, but my obligation as a lawyer is to tell you immediately. If I've screwed up anything like that, I gotta tell you. I mean, I wanna tell you, but I gotta tell you.
Okay, well, thank you. Another question I have is, what role do you feel the U.S. Constitution plays in local municipalities and then also at the state level?
Well, you're all sworn to protect it, so am I. So it's always there. you probably start your meetings with a pledge of allegiance, you know, most, I think everybody does almost, but the bottom line is, we're all sworn to defend and protect the Constitution. Sometimes you get into some interesting interpretation differences. We're entitled to those, you know, people can have debates about the meaning of stuff, but there's no question that the Constitution is the dominant document that governs us all.
Thank you. I have an add-on that I did last minute today.
All right.
But I just wanna know if you've been monitoring, the current bill HF 100 at the state level? And then have you worked with any municipalities in putting ordinances together, knowing that that might be passed?
Now, which one's H?
Cannabis.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Usually what we're dealing with, and we don't know, the reason why I asked that is there's several bills actually. And we don't know what's gonna come out of it. What most people have been doing that I've been involved with, the representative, been asking me about, is they're doing, moratoria, just to wait and see what happens without letting everything kind of take over the situation. Suddenly you've got 2 or 3 cannabis providers selling gummies to kids and who knows what else. And so, you know, everybody's concerned about it, but I think most people are just kind of waiting to see.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll just kind of let it that. I find the whole idea a little bit appalling personally, but you know, that's what that'll do is probably generate a little more business for your prosecutor.
Sure. Can I ask a question to that point? Let's just say this bill does pass and it becomes law.
Okay.
What rights do municipalities have to protect themselves?
You can regulate.
Okay.
Generally speaking, the way this is going is being treated sort of like tobacco, where you've got an opportunity to go in and regulate the manner in which it's sold. You know, you can't have a vending machine or something like that, and you can regulate places.
But could we say, not in our town, thank you?
It's possible, it depends on how this legislation comes out. There are towns, for example, that don't let tobacco sales occur, and I'm anticipating that something like that is gonna happen, but I served 10 years in the legislature. I have a healthy respect for its unpredictability. So one way or the other, you know, it'll be what it is. What I've been hearing is it'll be, you know, the footprint that's there is tobacco regulation. People saying, oh, okay, that seems to be working. And if they do follow that, then you'll have considerable say. We'll see. I think there's massive parts of the state that aren't going to want any part of it.
Those were, thank you. I answered my question really well, thank you, I appreciate it. That was what I had, so, oh, you know what? I actually have one other. I apologize. What experience do you have regarding TIF districts? How many have you been involved with? Familiar with the laws on?
How deep do you wanna go? You know, for example, if you're familiar with Fridley, I was a Fridley city attorney when they built that entire Medtronic corporate complex. I was actively involved on behalf of the city. Now, I'm not bond counsel, and there are other players in those kinds of things, but I do know the law very well when it comes to representing municipalities. Represented the city of Newport when they had their RDF plant constructed. And both of those cities were able to utilize the TIF district to generate a certain amount of additional development. It was critical in Newport, less so in Fridley, but they got this wonderful corporate, you know, headquarters right there on the freeway, which is kind of, so I've done a lot of that. Almost as important, I know who the players are, so when you know, because I'm dealing with, Ramsey has any of a number of TIF districts as part of their redevelopment plan. I wasn't involved in the creation, but I'm actively involved in negotiations with developers that come in, with the city staff there, that deal with those kinds of issues. And, yeah, I know, when I say I know who the players are, there's a relatively small number of firms that are bond counsel. There's a relatively small number of firms, good firms, but enough to be competitive. They're involved in finance recommendations to cities. And I generally know who those folks are, and if nothing else, they've probably heard of me. Good things, of course.
All right, that's all the questions I have.
I'm up next. How would you handle a workplace grievance?
Well, that can mean a number of things.
Right.
If you've got unions involved in that, it's actually relatively straightforward. There's usually a grievance process. They know what's supposed to happen. You know what's supposed to happen. And I have represented cities, smaller cities, in those grievance proceedings. And
Well, probably on a lower scale than that, because we're not asking about unions, but let's, say something happens within, a city staff.
with that too, and again, it depends on the nature of the situation. I mean, we've had, if it's a complaint about workplace conditions or environment, or someone is, let's say, a toxic situation where someone is just going off the deep end, is being very abusive, and it's causing some staff problems. You technically, it might be a grievance, it might not be a grievance, but I've been involved in those kinds of processes, and in usually negotiating a solution. Sometimes that amounts to someone agreeing to leave. And I say agreeing to, and I put quotes around it, it's always a difficult situation. I had one situation where I had to do that with a chief of police, who had been developing a relationship, let's say, that should not have occurred with city staff. So those things happen all the time, and if they're happening here, don't think, oh my God, this is the worst city on the planet, this doesn't happen anywhere else. It happens everywhere. It's part of what happens when you manage people. So yes, I'm involved in that, but it depends on whether it's a contract employee, whether it's an appointed employee, any of the rest of those kinds of things that come with it.
I guess this is a follow-up question. How would you describe how you would conduct investigations into any grievances?
Professionally.
Yeah.
I mean, and sometimes, you get choices in these kinds of things. There are outside parties that conduct investigations and so forth, but as a city attorney, I've had on a number of occasions, been at this for a while, where I was asked to conduct an investigation, and I come in and I do what I consider to be an independent investigation. We get information, we talk to witnesses, we generate a report, and depending on what we've been charged doing, either you get that or your chief administrator gets that and decides where to go from there.
Okay. Now, this last question I have is off that subject. Our wastewater system, it's ponds, and then when it's cleaned, it's discharged into the St. Croix River. So, are you familiar with the National Discharge Elimination Permitting Systems?
I have some familiarity with that. It's not something that I've had to deal with a lot.
Well, we really never had an issue here
Oh,
also,
okay.
so,
But I certainly have some familiarity with that. And, I naturally assume that, no one's gonna accuse Taylor Falls of deliberately polluting the St. Croix River, right? So, I dealt with things like that.
okay, thank you. Mr. Troy, I think
Yeah,
you're up.
thank you, Larry. Thank you again for coming in, Fritz, appreciate it.
My pleasure.
My first question is a former city employee has filed a lawsuit against the city of Taylor's Falls and a former council member. How does this impact, influence, or affect your legal representation of the city of Taylor's Falls and the current city council?
Not at all. Again, these things happen. That's why we have insurance. And I get the sense by the question that you may not have a lot of this stuff happening in Taylor's Falls, where it gets good for you. But it happens. And that's one of the things that you learn to appreciate why you've been spending money for insurance with the league. They have a battery of lawyers. I've known them for years. Certain law firms tend to, like other insurance companies, they have their insurance defense firms, and I know those guys, and I've worked with them for a long time, all of them virtually. Who is representing the city, do you know?
LMC.
Yeah, the Lehman Associates, do you know who they've selected, or is it in-house?
I'm not sure if I can
Forget her name.
reveal, I know her
Julie
name.
Fleming Wolf.
Oh, I,
It's public. In the public.
Okay, yeah.
domain.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's,
Yeah,
yep.
Julie Fleming Wolf.
I've known her for longer than she would probably want me to say.
So, can I ask a follow-up to that?
Sure.
So as our city attorney, if you
Right.
were, we brought you on, would there be any interaction? Cause we're members of the league, they're representing us.
Right.
But they're not, I guess specifically our in-house attorney.
Right.
So what type of interaction would there be, or would there be none? We just review what's submitted back to us and continue a dialogue, or would you assist with that?
Oh, well, assist is one way of putting it. I'm actually responsible, as a city attorney to provide you with legal advice. And I am the attorney for the city at Round Point. So normally what the league will do is, in a case like that, they will interact and keep me informed at all times. And when you do the annual, audit, the annual legal audit, that's something that I'm required to discuss with your auditor, no one else. So I'm responsible, even though I may not be doing the case, for the outcome. Like I said, I know the lawyers, you know, so it's not like there's gonna be some kind of friction or anything like that, but I'm the one that advises you. Ultimately, yes, they're representing you with respect to that one case, but, you know, I, as the city, the city attorney is the one who's responsible for seeing that you're guided through that, and frankly, for giving you advice about the decisions that you may be required to make, as a litigant.
Very good, thank you.
You actually answered this in your proposal, but in light of that last question, I just wanted to ask, what, if any, conflicts of interest do you currently have in serving as a city's attorney? If there are any, how would they be addressed?
Well, none, for starters. Usually that happens when you've got adjoining cities. We don't have any, or, you represent, the mayor's family's business thing. I don't have anything like that here. What we do, and I've been doing this again for some time, I have never had a conflict that has required me not to represent the city, ever. And part of that is because I've been very careful, you know, in anticipating conflicts. If one exists, I have to disclose to the parties, but my priority is representing the city. So let's say that there is, and I've seen this, some family that has a trust issue and needs to come to the city council to get a zoning issue resolved in order to sell some property. And the city attorney had represented that trust or that family in the past. It would require full disclosure, I'm sorry, and would require a written consent from you before I could continue to represent them. So that's the kind of thing that has to happen. It has to be transparent, it has to be in the open. One of the advantages of not having my proverbial shingle in downtown Taylor's Falls is that those kinds of conflicts aren't likely to exist. I mean, when you're the local lawyer, people are gonna come to you and they're gonna have issues and problems. And that's where conflicts can arise. So I have none, I don't anticipate having any, but bottom line is the city is the primary client.
Can I follow up on that? Who is the city?
That's actually a very intriguing question. The city is an entity that is led by you as the elected officials in the public trust. When you're the lawyer, you have to think about the city as this ethereal thing, if you will, this entity, and that's who you're representing. You're representing the corporation. You're not representing the council members individually, but the council members have their responsibility to the city, and in doing what you're doing, you have to interact with them and respond to them. So that's always a question that gets asked, and in fact, it's an ethical question that gets asked to lawyers a lot, which is, well, who are you representing if you've got some people that are doing something that is illegal or in some way harming the city? You have to disclose that, you have to be upfront about that, and your ultimate responsibility is to the city, the corporate entity.
Okay. I noticed in your proposal that you made a suggestion that, one of the things you would do, or have done as well, it says, as well as fielding everyday inquiries and complaints from citizens.
Right.
Do you actually talk to the citizens?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's with permission, and the, any communication that I do on behalf of the city is communicated to the city. It may not be the substance of it. Now, if it is a citizen complaint, the entirety of it gets conveyed to the staff or to the mayor, however you choose to have that line of communication. Sometimes there will be inquiries from, let's call them sensitive inquiries from council members, when they ask that, I don't want this really to be disclosed to the other council members. I'll respect that, but still, the fact that communication happened gets conveyed to the city. In other words, yes, I had a conversation with a council member without necessarily going into detail of what that is. Usually everybody can imagine, but it's not my job to say that. But that's the only exception to the rule. Otherwise, the city knows every contact that I've had with the citizen, and the city knows when I've been talking with council members, know when I've been talking with council. It comes in that bill, if nothing else, it'll be in the bill, communicated with council member. And it might be something that's not a problem regarding, road assessment issues. Or sometimes it's something more sensitive than that, in which case you'd have to specifically ask that, but that would be respected, of course.
My only other question, can we get you a bottle of water?
Here, thank you.
Yeah.
I was drinking tea coming up, I didn't bring it in, because I thought, oh, that's got form and I'll be fine, but it wasn't. So thank you.
My last question is, tell us about the type or types of municipal governing structures. For example, weak mayor versus strong mayor. Your firm has worked with. Which of these was the most effective or least effective, and why?
That's an interesting question. The overwhelming majority of people in councils and cities are under the statutory system. And I have been in cities that have wanted to have a charter for any variety of reasons. And those usually, once it's considered, those usually go away. There was an effort, I remember at Afton, and there was an effort on the part of a group of people that wanted removal. They wanted to be able to have petitions for legislation, just a full vote of democratic initiatives, small d. And it failed. And I think the reason it failed ultimately was that people really were all in all satisfied with the basic structure that has evolved and has become the statutory city. There was a time where you had different types of cities, different classifications of cities. Cities of the first class, cities of the second class, and some could do some things and some could not do others. But eventually what evolved is the system that most people use, and it allows you to have an administrator. It can be the clerk treasurer, it can be however you want to define it, to run the city depending on your size. There's a lot of flexibility in the system. And for the most part, it's proven to be very satisfactory. I have had charter cities, and I can't say, I know everybody has their identity as a city, and and it can assist in that, but I don't know that having a charter is necessarily gonna be something that's going to be, something you wanna do without some specific reasons. I will say this, it is easier for a, charter city to get administrative fines. In other words, where you set up a system where, you keep it out of the courts, you've got your own hearing officer, all that kind of stuff for certain kinds of traffic offenses, certainly zoning offenses. It's remained easier for charter cities to do that, because they can ignore other provisions of the law. They've been trying, the league's been trying, I know, to make it more flexible for statutory cities, but they haven't quite arrived. So, it's really, the differences really aren't as great as you might think, and I think the basic statutory city structures work very well for just about everybody.
Thank you.
Well done, Troy.
Yep.
If your firm is selected to represent the city of Taylor's Falls, how would you envision that onboarding process to go? How long would it take? Give us some examples of what types of information you might want and how your interactions would be to learn about us.
Well, that's a process. I would anticipate, obviously, I show up at the meetings, I would answer the questions and try to find out every way I can, informally, drive around, being in Taylor's Falls, I've been here many, many times. So, it's not like you're a mysterious city somewhere out in the deep woods, but, you just get, it's just like anything else, you get to know the people, and that's just showing up and listening mostly and observing. But it takes, I would say, about 6 months before you start to get a sense, generally, you start to get a sense of how a council works, what the personalities are, where the clashes are likely to be, and, and about what, and where the problems might be. And it's just a matter of time. Obviously, we become very familiar with the ordinances in a hurry. But ordinances tend to be very alike in a lot of ways, zoning ordinances and so forth. There will be things certainly that'll be unique. You've got a unique downtown, there are all kinds of things that'll be unique to you. But the basic structure of all the ordinances and the basics of what you do is pretty standard. The key is to see how you flavored it a little bit earlier.
Thank you. Can you tell us about any experiences that you might have had in regards to public nuisance matters?
Oh, man,
Let's hear some really good.
oh, no, one of the most recent ones is the skims down in Newport. And, they're helplessly right across the river from a rendering plant. And just to the south of them, they have, big employment generator, but a massive, refinery. And, I was just thinking as I was driving out here, this wonderful fresh air, and I'm not smelling dead animal carcasses, this is wonderful, And you get used to it, but we ended up being in front of, this is just a couple years ago, which is why it comes to mind, that was a federal case. We ended up being in front of Judge Tooney, trying to intervene in a case, because you've heard of these lawyers that go around looking for lawsuits and so forth. There is a group of lawyers that go around looking for lawsuits against this particular company, and they've been doing this all over the country. And so we had a very interesting case involving allowing us to intervene, allowing us to provide certain evidence about how the citizens were adversely affected. You're adversely affected if you can't have a picnic in your own backyard because the smell is so bad, So that's one end of this. But I would guess that one of the areas involved, where as a city attorney, I've been involved in more litigation, is in the nuisance area. And it can take on a variety of things. The usual nuisance case is someone that has a collection on their property of items that some people are thinking maybe, it's junk, and one person's junk is another person's treasure. And you see a wide variety of ways that can be enforced. The more rural the area is, by and large, the greater the leeway people are generally willing to allow, just as a practical matter. But, yeah, that can be interesting as well. I had one case where, this was up in Anoka County, where the joke was, at the courthouse, that this guy was serving life on the installment plan, basically for refusing to do anything to his yard. And they had tried. He had been in front of, I was told by one judge, every single judge, at one time or another in Anoka County, where it's just stubborn. And I kind of thought, well, has anybody actually sent him, rather than the courts, has anybody actually tried to see if this guy maybe needs some help? So we got him to plead, but rather than actually, going to jail again for the umpteenth time, we had him put on probation where he was evaluated, and lo and behold, he was evaluated. He was a veteran. He was evaluated, and they found that he had certain treatable conditions related to depression and a few other things. And as part of the process, he ended up getting on a regular treatment regimen, and he became a model citizen. I wouldn't say you could eat off the patio in his place, but it was more than acceptable. So there's just a wide range of issues that you come across when you're dealing with nuisances. Like I said, the more general one is the stuff in the yard thing, but there are others. I mean, I'm sure Franconia every once in a while has somebody say, that's not art, but it all depends.
Thank you. For cities where you don't provide the city attorney role and function, do you provide ad hoc services? And if so, could you explain a little bit about what those might be?
I guess I'm trying to understand the question. So, I'm not a city attorney, but
You get a cold call?
I get a call.
Yeah.
We need some advice.
Right.
You start with, you always start with an agreement in writing, which allows me to represent you, even if it's just to answer a question, and I answer the question, and we have an agreement as to what the amount is, and I do it. That does happen.
I think the other questions are pretty much answered. So I would,
Do you go to every council meeting, or do you
Yes.
do, okay?
Yeah, again, it's one of those things where I just think it's a very good idea, and I learned early, when I was doing this, that you want to be there, and that the council, one way or another, should probably want you there. There are no stupid questions, and you keep people from going down paths that are occasionally difficult to get out of later, that they shouldn't be going down, legally speaking. And so I just think for the most part, it's a healthier way, for want of a better term, a healthier way, to represent a city. I've always done that. I've had cities come in and say, well, that seems so unnecessary. Well, we pitch a flat fee. If you wanna make me a little richer, I don't have any kids to put through college anymore, but you don't have to have me there. But as a practical matter, we wanna be there. I wanna be there. And I think you probably want me there. Now, the question is, well, what about the planning commission? Well, we show up for those two on request. For me, the critical one is, and that's part of the fee. But the critical one is the council, just getting everybody used to it, and not having anybody feel bad about having to have a lawyer there, because he costs us so much money every time he shows up. You're paying him under this system, whether he shows up or not, so he better show up.
I did have one more, I'm sorry. What complementary services do you provide that you would think would be unique to your firm? Outside the norm, kind of city attorney, I know that's a broad bucket, but are there areas of expertise that you think differentiate your firm from others?
Just the level of experience is what I would say. Who knows what other things can come in. For example, I mean, I've represented on specific issues, I've represented some city clients in the legislature. Cause I have that background and you'll appreciate this because you're in elective office, but I didn't make a career out of doing lobbying because my feeling was that, if I couldn't be a player, I didn't wanna watch the game, right? So, but every once in a while, it's useful to have those skills and those contacts. It does come in. So there's an area right there, and I would not expect, but who knows, that there would be a lot of need for that. And we have, the people I practice with, a lot of experience in real estate, a lot of experience, with the closings and all the rest of it that comes with that. It's a little bit out of the box for most municipal law firms.
Great, thank you. Lee?
Hey, with a monthly retainer fee, what does that cover?
Everything.
Everything.
And we listed it out,
Right,
but all of the writing, showing up, getting the calls, fielding the calls, all of which we keep track of course, and let you be aware of, the amount of time we're actually doing it. Ordinance drafting, if it's necessary to actually start a lawsuit of some sort, let's take, nuisance as an example. There's a nuisance claim, you can always cite them, that wouldn't be us, whoever does your prosecution, but you can take a civil matter and go forward. We do that, we do everything that, and part of the flat fee, including the flat fee, is about 10 hours a month related to litigation, so that, you're not paying a flat fee and then all of a sudden you're paying twice that because the lawyer's representing it, so we try to be sensitive to that. And frankly, 10 hours a month should take care of just about everything, except an actual knockdown, drag out trial. A condemnation, for example, might take more than that, but you still get that discount built into your fee. So, again, we don't want you worrying about what this is going to cost us. The idea is just anything that normally would be part of the lawyer's representation of the city, it's part of that fee. It's a lot of writing, it's a lot of things, that you may not have thought of.
Can I dovetail into there?
Sure.
In addition to the things that you cover,
Right.
is there anything that pops up in your mind that might be over and above?
Well, I just mentioned one.
What was that?
Litigation, you get the 10 hours, but condemnation, for example, you can get a condemnation case where it's gonna be more than 10 hours a month, it just is.
Are you saying condemnation?
Condemnation,
Okay.
and that could be any of a number of things. My most recent one was to get a water tower built in Newport. And, as always, in a smaller city, that's all complicated. The person that owned that wonderful high piece of ground, second highest in Washington County, had aspirations to have that be a cell tower, and it was turned down by the city. So there was bitterness about it. There was a certain bitterness there that you get in a smaller city, because it's all personal, when the city decided, well, we need that high ground because we want to put our water there. But, yeah, that's an area. But again, our fallback on that is $150 an hour rate, which we still think is low, but we still think that's competitive. We know a lot of our competitors are, charging as much as $250 an hour for that. And I keep getting pounded by my partners saying, well, we're worth that money, it's what we do.
Thanks.
so that would, with the monthly retainer, you end up keeping track of as we go along, and then once you reach the end of the monthly retainer, then it's by the hour? No?
No,
Okay,
flat fee is a flat fee.
okay,
It's everything. Okay. The one exception that we carve out in the agreement
Right.
is litigation, and the one kind of litigation where that could happen is condemnation.
Right.
But I would say in the 40 years we worked with Newport, that happened 4 times, maybe. Where you get beyond that, believe me, we keep track of it.
Oh, sure,
But-
sure.
But where you get beyond the 10 hours,
Mhm.
that's very unusual, and it's intended to be unusual. The idea is that it shouldn't be something that in the normal course of business you should be worrying about.
So you're not concerned that we'd be really high maintenance and take all of your time?
It's what I do. And I think you may find that you may think you're high maintenance, but you're,
We don't have anything to compare it to.
no, that's right. Definitely, no.
Why does your firm want to represent our city of Taylor's Falls, and what do you know about our city?
Well, this is what we like to do, and I think as I described, a smaller city, and of all the cities in Minnesota, I mean, I had Afton for any of a number of years, all the cities up and down the St. Croix Valley on either side of the river are unique. They're unique. And by and large, the kind of people that are in those smaller cities that have taken it upon themselves to be involved in government to begin with, tend to be good people. You know, it's not like, you know, the devil himself is out there saying, well, what can I do? Let's find some people running for city council. It's not that way, you know, as you know. People tend to be very positive in that. And I think in this particular area, people share a single kind of pride about, so everybody knows that the St. Croix Valley's got something special about it. And so from my perspective, you know, I like small cities. And, you know, St. Croix Falls, being city attorney St. Croix Falls, on a professional level, to use that old Norman French term, would be cool.
My last question was, specifically who would be representing us, but you already answered that.
It's me.
Yep.
It would be a very rare occurrence, for somebody else to show up. And I'm just not anticipating, as we've looked and checked the record and so forth, that we've got, I think, a pretty good idea of what the amount of time would be. And even if we've underestimated by 50%, it would not be a problem for us, so.
That was it for me. Any other questions pop in our minds?
I got a quick one. Were you aware of the lawsuit facing the city of Taylor's Falls?
Just generally.
Okay.
Just generally. And I do know, especially if you don't have a history of being litigious, that, you know, a litigating group, that can be very unpleasant to think about. I mean, it's hard to think, oh my God, we've been sued, you know, we're wrong, who knows, you know, all the bad things that'll come to us. No, you have to think of it like a business thinks of it in that sense. This stuff happens. Disgruntled people happen. And lawsuits happen. And lucky you, if you haven't had a lot of them, because there are some cities that get them all the time. And if you catch them in a moment of weakness and banter, the league would probably be able to list you about half a dozen that they get, you know. But you're not one of them. Be glad you're not one of them. Be glad you've got the insurance. And get on with what you're doing, representing the city, and don't let that be the focus of your energy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just any questions that you might
Do you have
have
any
of us?
questions for us?
No, I like this. I very much appreciate you inviting me up here. And I really like the interaction. I don't see anybody up there that I think, oh God, that guy's gonna be trouble. None of that,
Give
and
us
that's
time.
good, you know? Oh, no, you can kinda tell right away in terms of the questions and the interactions and so forth. So I appreciate your time and I appreciate the invitation. I'm sorry we had a little communication hiccup last week. We had people on vacation and, sick. So, does happen.
Other members of the council, are we, on our rating sheet here, are we clear as far as the civil idea and the criminal idea on the rating sheet? Will you be representing us both for criminal and civil?
My understanding was that it was just for civil.
Civil,
We
okay.
are certainly able to represent you criminal,
Okay, so
I talked a little bit about the dynamic of that, is that during COVID, increasingly what you see is larger firms pitching, to do the prosecution services. And with so many things being done, Zoom and the like, you know, it's fairly easy to put an associate in front of it and have 4 or 5 people, or 4 or 5 municipalities doing all that. You know, and we've certainly done that, we've represented cities for prosecution, but this pitch is just,
Okay.
if you want us to pitch, well, we will do that. But that's-
Well, I just, you know, it's on our rating sheet, and I
Right.
just, in my own head, I'm trying to figure out, you know, what would be criminal.
You know, and if I can just take a last second on that, that's a very interesting question. In part because sometimes in enforcing your zoning code, you go into the criminal prosecution side. And what happened in the case of Fridley is that they were not happy with the fact that the focus of the prosecutors in Fridley, of course, was DWI and everything, all the traffic they had, and they thought that their zoning issues were being given short shrift. I don't know whether that's true or not, but in any case, they thought so. And so our civil contract actually included prosecution for zoning matters, you know, when it came to a criminal thing, and to separate it out. And that came to the council there on the recommendation of the staff. They just thought it would be better. So we had all kinds of interesting trials, because the zoning cases tend to be, let's say, more fun than DWI stuff, but, yeah. So that's up to you, you can kind of decide, well, you know, DWI and all that kind of stuff, sure, we can let the county do that or whatever, you have to do that. But we were gonna carve out the zoning stuff, because we just think that makes more sense. It's up to you.
Good question.
Well, any other questions that?
No, again, thank you,
Yeah.
this was a nice way to start the week.
Well, Chris, thank you for your time, we really appreciate you making the trip up here, and,
No charge.
thank you for that. We'll be in touch then.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Safe travels. We have till 11:30.
So do you wanna?
Do we wanna do a short recess,
Mhm.
Yes.
and then we'll reconvene, and should we reconvene at 11:15, is that?
Right, if they show up earlier and you're talking about this, then it might be kind of.
Should we do 10 minutes and then come back?
Yeah.
Alright, let's take a recess here for 10 minutes and we'll be right back. It's 10:20.